Hello, good evening, and welcome to Lynne Franks in Conversation with Extraordinary Women. And I am your host, Lynne Franks, of course, and I am really delighted to be here today with my friend, good friend, Orsola de Castro, who has done more actions to change the fashion industry worldwide than any other single person that I know. You are a revolutionary, you are a warrior, you are a designer, you're now an author, you are extraordinary. Since we first met quite some years ago, I have seen you grow in the extension of all the work you're doing, and Fashion Revolution, the movement that you co-founded, has literally changed the world in terms of how we view fashion. So that's welcome. That's a big intro, sorry. Anyway, it's all genuine. I really am so impressed with what you're doing. And we're going to be talking about your fantastic book, Love Clothes Last, quite in detail. As you can see, I've made copious notes, got little stickers all the way through. I love it. It's amazing. And what I love about it is there's so much information and knowledge about how clothes are made, the history, and how we can do things a different way. And I was just saying, as we were waiting to come on, that when we organised this date to speak about clothes and fashion and loved clothes, I didn't even know it was London Fashion Week, which has started today. And coming from me, who of course started London Fashion Week 30 odd years ago, and a year ago came out with Extinction Rebellion saying enough is enough, we don't need this very ritzy, schmitzy event anymore. It's time to do things a different way. Of course, you've been working on that for a lot longer. So it's extraordinary that this is the first day. We love clothes. We love fashion, both of us. I know that. We also want to support the industry in a sustainable way. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how we both see fashion industry going forward, and how we as consumers and designers and manufacturers can really contribute to a new kind of way of supporting an industry, which is very important in many ways, but also very destructive in others. So that's how I just wanted to start. So there's also other things going on it which are a bit weird, but let's start with your story, because I knew you when you were running your fashion company with your husband Felipe, and you were designing using fabrics from leftover fabrics, really, from other companies. You tell your story. How did you start getting involved in the industry to begin with, and when?
Well, that way, I mean, in my case, it was rather odd. I had a jumper that was broken, a bit like the one that I'm wearing today. It's broken with holes. And I am very good at crochet, so I took my crochet needle and I started to crochet around each hole with little beads and lovely yarns and salvaging jumpers as I went along. And then, I wore them. Somebody said, "Oh, nice. Could I have one?" At the time, I was also doing a lot of textile printing, and I was selling at the Cross, which was this 1997, 1996, 97. Super, super, super cool boutique in London. And so I started doing these little runs of jumpers, which then sold pretty quickly internationally. And then I started making more and finding more from secondhand to big warehouses in Italy. And then I discovered that factories produced their own obsolescences and waste. And so I started working with luxury factories in Italy and using their waste. So I had a brand for between 1997 and 2014. Very small, very pioneering, but we were quite cool. We were on Carrie and Sex and the City, and we were selling in New York, in Paris, in Milan, in Tokyo. It was the end of the 90s. By the way, sustainability didn't exist. Upcycling, the word, not in circulation. So it was a creative start for me.
You were the first person I heard say upcycling. You were the very first person that referred to it.
No, but I didn't coin it. It was coined by somebody called Rana Plaza.
Well, I never heard him say it, but I heard you say it. So you got it out there, that's for sure.
But no, many others did. But anyway, yes, of course, we were a little movement of people doing it, so we peddled it. But that's when I started realizing about waste, because we were pioneering in the sense that we were producing slightly more at scale than the unique piece. We could reproduce in numbers. And basically, I became aware of this huge problem that I had not been, had not been visible to me, like it wasn't visible to anybody really. At that time, early noughties, the industry was moving really fast towards China then. And so this was my experience. I then co-founded and co-curated Aesthetica, which was the sustainable fashion area at London Fashion Week for the British Fashion Council. We started in 2006, which was a very pivotal place for the whole sustainability movement at the time.
It was so important. You know, I remember walking around with you.
Yeah.
That no one really understood it. What was it? It was the people that were running the fashion industry in those days didn't quite understand it, and thought it was some kind of quirky.
There was a very hardcore group in the UK of organisations that were working towards sustainability, and Aesthetica by no means was founded by three people, which would be in name myself, Filippo, and Anna Orsini, and Hilary Riva was then head of the BFC, so she gave us the go ahead after actually Filippo suggested it, but. The reality is that there was already a movement starting in the UK, the Ethical Fashion Forum, which then became Common Objective. CO was starting then. And just to name a few, the Centre for Sustainable Fashion with Phyllis Williams under Francis Corner's London College of Fashion. So Ted, Professor Becky Early at Chelsea College, so there was really a strong and the first brands that were starting, Pachacuti, who with Carrie, we then founded Fashion Revolution, People Tree, but Aesthetica was pivotal in bringing a lot of people together. And then in 2013, I founded Fashion Revolution together with Carrie, who I mentioned.
So tell us about that. Tell us about Fashion Revolution, because why that happened, and what made you move ahead with it, and then how quickly it grew to a worldwide movement, because I want to talk about starting a movement generally. So what was the start of Fashion Revolution? What made you start it?
Rana Plaza. I mean, in a nutshell, Rana Plaza. When Rana Plaza happened, because it had been so predictable and indeed predicted, because it was so closely.
So for a lot of people who may not know what Rana Plaza was, this was a time when there were, it's still a time when there are a large amount of factories in Asia which are exploiting labor and are very unsafe. And Rana Plaza was in Bangladesh and burnt down, killing how many workers were killed?
It collapsed, killing 1,138 and injuring more than.
Oh, it collapsed. It didn't. It wasn't
and they
on fire.
Were mostly young women.
Yes, it didn't. It wasn't a fire, was it? It just collapsed and.
No, it just collapsed. Yeah, yes. The fire was Kazreen 2 years before. That's the one that you're confusing it with, which was only 300 people died or something like that. But anyway, yeah.
Just terrible. And of course, the fact that they were being paid peanuts. There's a great quote. I don't know if I'll come to the right page in the book, but there's a great quote about I think the CEO of a fashion company in the West will earn more in 4 days than a fashion worker in Bangladesh in a lifetime. I think that's the quote you've got in here somewhere. It's shocking. So, and we know that this exploitation of cheap labor has been going on for a long time. And my other friend, Bibi Russell, have you met Bibi? Because she was in Sri Lanka when
yes, I think I did meet her.
So she is Bangladeshi in design. She's Bangladeshi. She trained at London College of Fashion here as a designer, and she's been working in Bangladesh for many years, as well as other parts of Asia. Really just trying to make it sustainable and not only good for the earth, but making sure that the workers don't get exploited. And it's a struggle because Bangladesh is a very poor country. So she got them weaving khadi, which was, of course, the Gandhi fabric, that khadi wool that he used to encourage all his followers to make. Anyway, at some point I have to introduce you to Bibi. We'll get this both online at the same time. Wanted you to get together for ages. So so tell me, you and Carrie came up with the idea of Fashion Revolution. What was the original idea?
Carrie in the bath called me literally straight away, and we'd met at Aesthetica. We had been, she had been one of our designers for a number of years, one of our most successful designers. And she called me, having had the idea, she had the name Ready Made Fashion Revolution. And the initial concept was, something commemorative. Within a year, and as soon as we started talking, we realized that both of us weren't really thinking about making or having an event. I was up here with events after years and years of British Fashion Council, Aesthetica, one event after the next, and so we both really wanted to do something different. But we we contacted many of the people that, as I mentioned, we had all met in Estetica, and that was the founding team, with individuals that we had known and worked with already, and that we were exchanging, these conversations for a number of years. So the first, founding team was formed, and then at the time we were just on Twitter. And it pretty quickly became obvious that there were people all over the world that wanted to represent fashion revolution in their countries or support the birth of a fashion revolution in their country. And then we started with a hashtag Who Made My Clothes, which has now been used millions of times. And the concept behind the hashtag was to ask something which sounds like a relatively simple question, to expose how impossible it is for the industry to actually reply. And, that in itself was very much honoring the lack of transparency, that, exposing the lack of transparency that we had seen when the Rana Plaza collapsed. That, nobody knew, the major brands that were producing there did not know that they were producing there, and we wanted to honor the work of the people that had died, but at the same time expose the opaqueness of the system that had killed them in many ways.
Yeah, and I remember when you did that first social media campaign. I mean, social media was how the word got out, and you had people. Wasn't there T-shirts you made? There was something to do with T-shirts.
No. Strictly no product.
Oh, okay.
We were one of the first campaigns to make our branding available to everyone to download for free online. But we've been 100% anti-product from inception. No one can make T-shirts. No one can make any product. We wouldn't be able to.
No, I thought there was something we had to. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I thought there were people who'd written on their T-shirts "Who made my clothes" or something. Maybe.
I mean, it happens that for some global. I mean, at one point, maybe 1 or 2 years after the very first year, we had thousands of events happening globally, and then of course, if people want to overprint on an old T-shirt, for an event, that's fine. But we've never been commercializing anything.
No, I wasn't.
We've been asked millions of times.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
So Who Made My Clothes was customized.
Yeah, I saw it everywhere. And so, how many countries is it? Do you know how many countries that are now part of what you're doing?
But just over 90, and we really are it's our country coordinators that make us who we are, because obviously we have so many individuals involved, and each from a different perspective, each from their perspective, from their country. And we work together as much as possible, and we, to hear from each other. But so I would say we have a sort of maybe 30 teams that have been with us for longer, and are strong enough to begin to fundraise and be more self-sufficient. And the majority, the other teams, are still very much volunteering for Fashion Revolution. And so we provide them with all of the assets, and we campaign together. But we do work as closely as we can on many initiatives, and it is very definitely our country coordinators are 100% our super strength.
And have the manufacturers, the large manufacturers and large retailers, come in with you, and have they changed the way they're manufacturing because of what you're doing? Because they have to.
We don't really work at that level, neither with brands nor manufacturers. We have several initiatives in which we engage with industry, one being the Fashion Transparency Index, which we've done now for 5 or 6 years, I think, and which is a tool to measure transparency and public disclosure when it comes to the top mainstream fashion brands, the top 250. We've progressively gone from 40 when we started to 250. So that's a way that we engage with industry. But obviously, because we measure, we are completely partial. So we do not work with fashion brands, but we encourage them in many ways to compete with each other. I mean, the Fashion Transparency Index is a very important tool. It's not really designed for consumers. It's meant to be for the industry. But of course, it had so much press, consumers do use it, and consumers should be able to use it to scrutinize, really. But it's not a shopping guide. And it nevertheless has its clout.
And have you seen the change? Yes. Have you seen it change?
We've seen a massive increase. We've seen a massive increase in transparency, not in how much they disclose, but in how many more brands are prepared to start a process of disclosure. And I think that transparency is much more on the map since we've been, at it with Fashion Revolution, for sure.
So moving from Fashion Revolution, which really has become, well, a movement of change worldwide, which I really do congratulate you on. Who I remember when it started, I'm sure that when you look back to what you were thinking of doing then and how it's grown, I'm sure it's gone way beyond your expectations, because it's obviously a full-time, I assume it's a full-time occupation for you, but in the meantime, you found the time to write this really, really special book. And what I love about it, as I was saying to you earlier, is that there's so much information here. And I'm going to read out a few quotes, if you don't mind, because I've just marked them all. So at the beginning, you talk about the statistics in clothing industry, and you've described them as almost grotesque. Clothing production has doubled in the past 15 years, and yet we are wearing our clothes less and less, either keeping them hidden and useless at the back of our wardrobe or getting rid of them without thinking of the consequences. And as a result of the supposed 53 million tons of textiles produced globally every year, over 75% are discarded, both in the production phase and at post-consumer level, which is after we've worn it. So the equivalent of a rubbish truck full of discarded clothes goes straight into a landfill every second. I mean, it's just shocking. And I do wonder whether things have changed one way or another during the COVID lockdown. Are people shopping more? Are they shopping less? They're obviously not going out. They're not dressing up. A lot of people are sort of padding around in pajamas for much of the day. So how has it been affected? Have there been any figures or analysis done that this has changed during this time, which is, as I've said before, it's such an awful time, but in many ways, it gives us an opportunity for change of the things that need to be changed?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I had a lot of help with the numbers and the statistics because I'm not very good at remembering numbers. And so therefore, even if there were statistics around consumption around the time of COVID, I probably wouldn't have registered them. What I do know is that there is a much deeper level of understanding that things are unequal. And this is thanks to COVID. I mean, COVID really has exposed the way that the fashion industry has been operating, the way that the whole system has been designed to function. And yet again, as we were talking about Rana Plaza before, it always takes a disaster. But again, it has highlighted these profound inequalities that the fashion industry is immensely culpable of. We've all seen it. We've seen supply chain workers not being paid, garment workers not being paid for cancelled orders, being sacked, or being made to work in unsafe conditions. We've seen, on the other hand, the main brand owners cashing in with online. So we see the misery and we see the excess that creates that misery. And we've also seen and know that in many ways there's going to be an awful lot of stuff stuck in warehouses that hasn't sold because
there's no one's going shopping.
Whatever happened, we skipped a season, we skipped 2 seasons, I don't know. So we will be surmounted with problems when we get out of this. And it wasn't like we didn't have exactly the same problems a year ago, but the industry chose not to see it, or anyway, it wasn't quite so visible. I mean, I think Leicester and the Boohoo thing was crucial in making people understand that cheap fashion production has an impact on communities the world over. The fashion supply chain is not in Bangladesh. It is also in Leicester. And then it starts with your wardrobe. That's when you become a part of the supply chain.
Yes, we're all part of it, for sure. And you mentioned about the seasons. We've missed a couple of seasons. And I've been thinking a lot about that because you've actually referred as well to obsolescence. And I've been talking about that as the fact that fashion is designed to be obsolete within 6 months, if not earlier, is in itself crazy. And I've been part of that whole system. It's not, I can't be innocent on it. I was working for years in the fashion industry, and it was the normal thing. There would be a summer season and a winter season and lots of other little seasons in between. And the clothes were promoted, particularly the designer and high level design end, were promoted as, this is great for now, but you'll only be wearing it for a few months, because after 6 months you won't want to be seen in it, because it'll be the wrong color, the wrong shape, big shoulders, small shoulders, wrong length, and so on. And that in itself got completely out of hand, which is why I go back to the Fashion Week idea, that people are supposed to show 6 months ahead the sort of looks that people will be wanting, and then not want for very long. And it's quite interesting. I think the Fashion Week now is that it's online this time, that anybody can watch the shows. And is it, you might know more than me, is it, are they showing next season ahead? Are they showing forward? Or are they showing what's...
Not anymore. I mean, the trend thing, particularly with COVID right now, is not really, I don't think, an issue. People are preoccupied with showing something at some point somehow.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the seasonality, I mean, a lot of big luxury brands have said that they were going to reduce their amount of offerings anyway. Well, they said that they were going to reduce their amount of shows. We don't know if that means less product in terms of offering. But I mean, to be honest with you, Lynn, I come from that. When in 1997, when I started my brand, that's how it worked. You did winter and you did summer, spring, summer, autumn, winter, spring, summer, autumn, winter. And then it did start going completely bonkers with resort, free fall, free this, free that, and party on, and a new season, was added almost yearly. But I don't mind the concept of trends, both as a designer in the sense that, they help you sell when something is trending and you can make it, you can cash in on it, and that's useful for young businesses or design businesses. What I mind is the quantity. I mean, what the issue that we've got now is that it's volumes. Of course, also volume of seasons. But the reality is that fashion, mass-produced luxury, there's a certain level of premium, are producing vast amounts of clothes that are, simply made. A lot of people say that fast fashion is predominantly badly made. I would say simply, for various reasons. And I also say, because it's simply made, it's simple to repair, but it's up to us to generate this longevity.
Yes.
And I think that the fashion industry is beginning to understand that a lot of consumers are beginning to look at what does better look like rather than more. And what I say is that better looks mended and repaired. And anything cheap or expensive, designer or fast. And
that is a lot of what the book is about, of course. I mean, that is what you write about in the book, about having well-loved, well, that's the name of the book. And you talk about your own well-loved items in your wardrobe, that you love the holes, you love the history, everything, every button has got a story that takes you back to part of your life. Do you want to sort of talk about that a little bit? I love that when you're talking about that, the trousers.
Well, I mean, even going from the designers at Fashion Week, I mean, how depressing must it be to be, designing clothes that are going to go straight into landfill to a certain extent if you're employed by, So, for me, it was always about the story that the clothes managed to say. And so it is about, 100% their longevity. And via keeping them as long as possible, I keep inputting my story onto these clothes. So for me, they're a little bit like photograph albums, with each breakage tells its own story, each repair tells its own story as well. And, I guess we're lucky that we live in a fashion time when this aesthetic is quite relevant. And many of the designers that are designing right now are really responding also to this look, which is, it's quite particular, quite unique. But for me, there is a total aesthetic in the used, the torn. There is a poetry to it. And I feel that we need to recuperate that sense.
Yes. I mean, you talk a lot about maintenance and caring, and something I never thought of before, which is actually washing your underwear when you have a shower watching your bras because it doesn't destroy them. I don't have such good quality bras as you do, so I throw them in the washing machine.
No, mine are really quite cheap actually, but they last a long time because I hand wash them mostly.
Yeah. So there's lots and lots of hints about that. We do a lot of that at Seed. I mean, even I, who am not the most craft person, have been making crafts here, tassels, and this week Tamsin, who's on this call, who is actually a textile artist and runs a Seed store, she taught us this week, whoops, I'm dropping everything, to take old sweaters and cut them up and make, it was so cold this week, and to make arm warmers. So I actually even made some arm warmers with a bit of help, which is quite, and I love it. I have to say, maybe it's again the fact we're staying in, we're not rushing out. So to actually put a needle in my hand and start sewing around gives me a huge amount of pleasure. And I don't have the talent that you have and others on this call have with the crocheting.
But interestingly enough, I'm actually not very good at mending myself. And that's probably because from my years as a designer, I've been spoiled by the most amazing seamstresses. So anything I try looks a bit candid. I mean, of course, I'm really good at crochet, and that's just the one thing. But the point I make in the book is that mending shouldn't be just about us trying to mend or us. I mean, of course, everybody is welcome, but society has an obligation to bring back mending as a habit for our communities. I mean, I always say, you know, fast fashion brands that produce cheap clothing, their responsibility is that of introducing cheap mending in the stores, because they are producing clothes that are being disrespectful to their workers and to the environment. They're not paying the cost to the garment worker nor to the environment. So it's really about bringing mending back, not just as this kind of quaint but valid thing that you can do and exciting and, you know, mellow, all that it can bring. It's also to reintroduce it as a main value, as a main principle, as a way to act together to stop that one truck that goes into landfill every second, to stop this idea that we can buy something that is so cheap that the only thing that you can do with it after you've worn it 3 times is throw it away. I mean, there is no way. There is a quote by Antoine de Lavoisier, who is the father of modern chemistry, and he says, in nature, nothing is created and nothing is destroyed, but everything is transformed. Every piece of clothing you've bought is rotting in some kind, you've thrown is rotting in some kind of a landfill somewhere, even if it was 50 years ago. So that's the issue that we've got.
Yeah, well, a lot of mine are rotting upstairs in my attic, actually. And I mean, I sell clothes. We have a store and we sell beautiful things, but they are, I mean, like this is made of converted saris in India by a small women's cooperative. And there are, and this I bought in America, I think, from a charity shop. And I think that's the other thing. Of course, the charity shops are all closed, but that shopping for vintage or shopping even in charity shops and then converting them into something that is something that works for you, works for me. It's taken me 70 odd years to get there, but I do think I've actually learned to understand my style, which is a kind of bohemian, sort of slightly aging hippie style, but I like it. And I don't need any more to feel that I have to have a new thing every time, every season. And I do think that's changing. And we were talking earlier about the industry now during the COVID period, but when we think about it, a lot of the big retailers and a lot of the high street, which has disappeared, were pretty down anyway. I mean, the Topshop group, Debenhams, most of them have been really on the edge for a long time because they were selling cheap rubbish. They weren't caring about the customers. I mean, the idea that you're saying of actually you come into the shop and you get things repaired and you can actually be part of it, much more of a relationship with the customers. That's not evident, and I think you're absolutely spot on with that. It's going to change. The retailers have got to become much more experiential and engaging. Yeah.
But also give space. You know, we're going to see an enormous amount of closed stores. I mean, you know, so I also blame the fact that we've got maybe 40% brands that control something, you know, over 95% of the market. Never trust me 100% with numbers, but it's close to that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so when a brand says, well, I'm providing my customer choice, that's what they call quantity. They call quantity choice. But the truth is that millions and millions of runs of pieces that look the same from, you know, London to, you know, wherever, the other side of the planet. That's not choice. that's just them bombarding us with stuff.
Mm.
Choice would be to have all of the young emerging designers that London Fashion Week actually over the years has been quite brilliant at supporting. It has to be said, because there's been a lot of talent coming out from the UK, since you started the beast.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we need to give visibility to designers from all over the world, to different things, renting, repairing, swapping.
I mean, there's some very interesting
with artisans from all over the world. I
completely agree with you. I mean, there's some very interesting designs coming out of Africa now. I was watching African Fashion Week the other day, and I was just blown away by it. There's some textiles and the Middle East. I was talking to some friends now that are living in the Middle East, and they were saying that so many of the garments that the women have to wear are now being turned into fashion items. They do it because they want to. They've changed the whole thing. And I think crafts generally, and you've talked about this in the book, I think the way we're going to look at crafts coming in from different countries and seeing how they, like I say, this scarf or other garments that can be something we can really connect with, made by women's collectives, there's going to be more of that. And I want to talk...
For sure. As we do the Fashion Transparency Index, one of Fashion Revolution's initiatives is called Fashion Open Studio. And we run it together with, some of our country coordinators. And this last April, I think we had 49 designers from 13 different countries. And this year, for Fashion Revolution Week, is going to be even more, as well as the UK cohort. And these are all small brands from all over the world, from Zimbabwe to Argentina, doing things really, really differently, definitely better.
I didn't know you did that.
And we need to see them.
Oh, yes. Oh, that sounds wonderful. I didn't know that at all. That's very, very interesting.
Well, our first event is during Fashion Week. Tomorrow, we're having a really brilliant one. Tomorrow, it's a UK brand called Congregation Design. But on the 23rd of February, we're doing this really amazing workshop, sort of event, Fashion Open Studio event, with a brand called Reset, which makes adaptive clothing, so clothing for differently abled people. And we're having a panel with Aja Barber, campaigner and Lawson. So, we need to see this kind of diversity in our fashion.
Yeah, I completely agree. Sizes, disabled for all kinds of shapes and sizes. We need to change that. One of the chapters I made a note of, and we've kind of talked about it a bit, is the internet and the rise of craftism. And the fact that, again, because people are in their houses and they're not getting out much, there's a return to using craft. As I said, I've seen it with our own seed members. And one of the things you've talked about here with figures I thought was really interesting, because your daughter, Elisa Lex, is involved in it, is pattern cutting. Well, not pattern cutting, is the old patterns that I remember from my childhood coming back. Do you want to sort of talk a bit about that? Because I love that idea.
Well, I think overall the technology in this sense has connected all of the dots. It's gone from taking something really primary, a primary instinct, a primary skill that probably lies dormant in most women. It's so associated with us, the concept of sewing, making. And then with technology, it just catapulted straight into the sort of science fiction realm. And the makers community, I have a huge respect for. It's getting bigger and bigger, but it's been consistently pushing for innovation for years and years. My own daughter, Elisa Lex, has a company called By Hand London, and they produce paper patterns, which are then sold both physically and in PDF forms, and they're super cool.
That's brilliant! They're in PDF form too.
To quite a lot of people who buy them. I mean, they're a big community, and like them, there are people who make their patterns available for free. One of our Fashion Open Studio designers, and that used to be also an aesthetica designer, is Katie Jones, who does this beautiful crochet. But Christopher Raber as well has made some of his patterns, waste-free patterns, the one that he uses to recuperate the waste in the studio, and he makes these kind of animals. He's made some of those open sourced as well. So we are beginning to see in a way, a new democratization of the product, that it can be conceived and created by the designer, but it can be made by you in your own space, for others or for yourself. So it's a really, I feel that this is where the internet is acting.
I remember
connection.
I remember when Elisa Lex launched her paper patterns, but I didn't know that they were now PDFs, which makes perfect sense. Of course they would be. That's so brilliant. And I love the fact that it's grown and become another movement. So and for young women, I mean, it's very special. Somebody, Nicholas Bourne, has written, there are threads such as Econyl made from fishing nets and fabrics from, I can't read all of it, made from recycled plastic. Does this help the problem of fashion waste, or is it another form of greenwashing, which you have talked about greenwashing? I mean, we sell yarns that are made from seaweed and plastic, the knitting yarns that have been made up. And in your opinion, the question is, do you think that that is just, does it help the fashion waste, or is it just another kind of greenwashing? I personally think it helps. I think it's good. I think it's very good.
My answer with greenwashing remains unchanged and has been the same for years. And that is my opinion. I don't think it matters. You should be really concentrating on developing yours. I believe that, you have different ways of interpreting a subject that is of interest to you. And in my opinion, the most important thing is to try and gain that knowledge first. People will react differently to different initiatives. I mean, I am suggesting that potentially right now everyone is somehow greenwashing, because it's very difficult to do something which we can prove consistently will change. It's not really happening.
Yeah.
So it's up to it's up to you to inform yourself and really develop the opinion and think, is this relevant for me? Do I believe it? Can I consider whether this plastic will shed when I wash it? What kind of, otherwise we will probably be here analyzing each point and then debating.
Yes.
Which is, a greenwash is not something you just say yes or no. You have to research first.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I did notice that several of the designers that are showing this week online as part of Fashion Week are now saying, when they list their various talents, sustainability goes on the list of what they're doing. So I'm going to be interested to see what they mean by that, because if you're making a fashion for one season, is that sustainable anyway? No, it isn't. But do we want to encourage young talent? Yes, we do. I mean, we've covered it a bit and you've said your thoughts on it, but it yes, as you say, is it greenwashing, or is it wanting to make change and researching it and doing it in a way that it's you've got to move forward with it. We can't just carry on as we have been. I've also, there's so much in this book. I love the book. I don't know if everybody saw it. Love Clothes Last. Some great stuff in it. You've also got how the whole year, you've got ideas for the whole year, how you can work with every month a different theme, from New Year's resolution, working with, you talked about, we look at every time it comes to January, we're looking at going to the gym or going on a diet, but actually let's look at about the fashion side of our lives and the clothes side of our lives as well. I won't go into great detail, but you might want to. February is Carnival month. So it's, you've actually won talking about your awards here, but nothing beats the joy when your kids come home bearing a prize for some concoction of clothes that you put together in order to make a costume. By far your most successful was Slinky Malinky. So, which I imagine you did for your younger daughter. I mean, you love the dressing up part. I know you well enough to see how you enjoy the clothes and putting them on and having fun with them. And I think that's a really big part of it, of actually enjoying. And there's a quote, was it Vandana Shiva? Oh, yes, she quotes you in the book. And of course, Vandana Shiva is such a huge hero for both of us. And she talks about, such a great quote from her, love clothes last, walks the small steps we can take to stop participating in this throwaway culture. And she quotes you saying that clothes are our chosen skin. With a needle, we sew and repair clothes, but also the tears and ruptures in our relationships with nature and society. And she says, read the book and bring back love, beauty, uniqueness, and permanence back in your life. I mean, that's a great quote. And I think the fact that clothes represent the tears and ruptures in our relationship with society and, of course, with nature is of extreme importance. So that's part of also what you've done here, is you've brought in sort of the philosophy of fashion in terms of the bigger picture, the connection with Mother Nature and what creates harm to the planet, and mostly, of course, what we can do in very simple ways to look after our clothes. And I got sent, I mean, it's obviously here in the book, your 10 practical tips. I don't know if you remember them offhand, but do you want to mention some of your tips for us to make sure we do, rather than me read them?
I don't have the book on me right now, and I don't remember
well,
the tips
okay.
one by one.
Okay, well,
so do you want to read one and I can tell
you? Okay, so you talked a lot about the ancient Japanese art of borrow, which I was fascinated with, and how you can mend your jeans using this Japanese art to salvage and give new strength to old damaged clothes. So do you want to explain a little bit about borrow and how that helps give strength to your clothes?
Well, it's actually, to be honest with you guys, when my agent found me on Instagram and told me, let's do a book about mending, I said, I don't know that I can do you a how to mend, because I myself, I'm not that good at mending, but I can definitely do you a why to. So when it comes to borrow and any other mending tip that I give, such as darning, I please beg of you, don't necessarily look at just my book. I mean, we've got borrow, we've got Katarina wrote about Mending Matters, which is a Bible. So I can only tell you that borrow is like something that aesthetically reminds us exactly of those torn jeans that are and have been so trendy, and yet it's something so ancient. And it's brilliant that we could actually, not bother to buy denim that has been chemically pre-damaged to make you look like you've been attacked by a dog, but in fact look back in time and also to a different culture and learn something new and make a connection you haven't made before.
Yes.
The book is more about that. And the tips, some of them are really practical, and my daughter Elisa really helped me with those, because I couldn't write instructions to save my skin. And also Bronwyn, who was our content designer at Fashion Revolution, definitely also helped with the research. So credit where credit is due. But the tips are both practical and
they're great tips. They're great tips. I mean, here, for example, you've kind of referred to getting tailoring done, but visit your local tailor, haberdashery, mending shops, and artisan makers for clothing alterations, crafting knowledge and advice. I mean, we have in my little town in Wincanton, we have a cobbler who looks very ancient as far as I can see, and he's great, and I'm so glad we've got him. But he really uses the ancient ways of mending leather, for example, and it is a real gift to have him here and talk to him about it. And one of the things you've got in the book about having a repair cafe where we could go take our we're looking at having a repair cafe here in Wincanton, but that's going to be for little machines and things as well. But to take clothes that need repairing, and we have a cafe here at Sea Cafe, which of course is closed, but we will be encouraging people to come in, and we do workshops actually in the store. Tamsin does them, where people come in.
There's a brilliant organization that's just started that I'm so bad with geography that I don't know exactly where it is, but it's called Mend Assembly. And it is all about a space where people can go and mend and create. I don't know that it is in Somerset, but
I haven't heard of it, but I mean, there are in a
number.
number.
We'll check it out. It's called Mend Assembly. It was started by this luminary woman who is like one of the world's experts on materials, Jocelyn Whipple, who was also in the Fashion Revolution team and one of the founding members as well. And Mend Assembly is amazing. It's as there are different initiatives being born, like the Seam London, Clothes Doctor, Sojo. There's places where you can, the Save Your Wardrobe is brilliant. That one for mending and cataloging. I mean, there's loads of places where you can.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of references in the book. I mean, you do refer in the book to other books that people should see in other organizations and networks, which is really
right. As I said, I'm really, really good with the inspiration. That I do know. I can write and make people aware because I know the story. And I think what I'm good at is telling people why you have to mend, why it's so important, why mending clothes is like mending systems. So I do humbly say that the mendings are lovely illustrations, But there are way better menders than me and way better mending.
We got that point. We got that point. I would not for a moment claim to be a mender either, believe me. I can't even see how to put the needle in the cotton anymore because I'm so old that my eyes can't work. But Tamsin's given me a needle threader, which I haven't worked out how to use either. So we got the picture. You don't have to be you don't have to be modest. The point is you're an inspirer.
That's a good thing. That's fits for the lazy like me. Like, why mend if you can just buy a vintage pin and shove it on top of a hole?
Well, there's a picture in the book actually of your jacket that you had, which was full of moth hole, and you put every badge and pin and brooch that you had on it, and it looks amazing. So I mean, what you have is style and originality, which I will give you full marks for. Never mind that you don't have to take the changes yourself. So I certainly don't either. But I think things like upcycling old clothes you've talked about, turning worn shirts and T-shirts into nightwear. I mean, we all do that, I'm sure. Skirts, cushion covers, and things about cleaning, which I hadn't thought about more before, which is like spot cleaning and then steaming. I mean, that's something you're good at.
That one I'm pretty, again, the lazy, you know, there is a tendency right now to, I'm quite messy actually. I'm not a tool and organized person. So I have a floor robe, I have a shed robe, I have a wardrobe. And the tendency I know is that of leaving things around and then picking it up and shoving it into the machine and taking it out. And that's something that I refrain from doing. So I will analyze something and actually see if it's dirty and it needs a wash. And I have become, I just lengthen this cycle by sponging, so, you know, if there is a stain. And this I've been doing, you know, regularly. And then I do, you know, before COVID, I did an awful lot of traveling for a long time. And so many of those trips work somehow better in a hotel room.
Yeah.
But showering, you know, if you're just needing to refresh something, just the steam from a shower and maybe a few essential oils.
Yeah.
Or the trick of washing, you know, why do a machine with knickers if you can wash your knickers, you know, at the end of the shower? You know, these are things that borderline between laziness and care, but I would call it common sense. You know, I'm not kind of bowing to lady convenience, but at the same time, I'm being quite logical about small things that I can do that I know that actually can have a positive effect. And I'm inventing them as I go along.
Yeah, no, I get that. And so Louise Allen has written here saying, do you know there needs to be a place of do we know there needs to be a place of grief with clothes? She's talking about, she found it very cathartic going through her late mother's clothes, and she wears some of them, but she gave and gifted so much beauty of her mum to charity. So I guess that's another thing, is grieving through the memories of loss with the people that we love.
Completely. I can still smell my grandmother in my clothes. I know it's not possible. I know that must be either a ghost but I smell her in her coat. Totally.
Wow. That's amazing. And there's a quote here that I'm going to ask for Q&A. Some of them are too small for me to read, actually, I have to say. Some of them I am. So if any of the people in the Zoom room would like to ask any questions, that would be great. And indeed in Steam Room too, which I can't see because my eyes aren't good enough. So anyway, there's a quote here, which you said, which I love, which is at the end of the book, which says, keep the clothes you have with pride. Minimize new acquisitions and do it with the kind of infectious enthusiasm that radiates joy and personal fulfillment, one that others close to you will follow. I mean, that sums you up completely. You have this extraordinary infectious enthusiasm for life. I've seen you many times with your family and your friends, of which I'm one. And because when I was living in Daya, alongside you, I mean, that's just sums you up completely. But the last sentence is particularly important, and I think it's also resonates for me. Because the only things we need more of right now are trees and whales and birds and bees, not clothes. And that's beautiful. And I really thank you for that. And I cannot recommend the book highly enough. We have it at the Seed Store, I'm glad to say. If another time you'd be down here signing them. But anyway, so we've got them here. And I'm sure they're everywhere else as well. It's a very, very important book. And I hope it will not be the only book you write. Your writing is very eloquent. I'm sure it took a lot to do it, but considering that English is not your spoken language, It's so
but I mean, it is.
well, I guess it
I've
is.
been here since I was 16.
Yeah.
There's no excuse. To be honest with you,
but it's beautifully written. I mean, it's just exquisitely written, and very readable and in every way. So
thank you. That's the biggest compliment.
Well, I really mean it. I really do. I love reading it. I really love reading it, and I will read it again. So there's lots of quotes here. So Maggie Kelly has said she had lovely quilts and cushions made from her late mum's clothes. That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, that's another brilliant one. Keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah,
totally.
Yes, and
there's a brilliant quote by, I can't remember who is this sort of American, saying, there's a T-shirt that I have in which says, "She who has the most fabric when she dies wins."
I love that. So lots of people are making things that belong to their mother. Beverly Father's daughter wears a dress that was her mother's, and she loves it. It must be at least 50 plus years old, and she loves it. I took my mother's, not that it's clothes, I took my mother's engagement ring and adapted it into a flower of life, which I wear around my neck all the time. Jo said, before her beloved great aunt died, she sewed, oh my God, that's amazing. She sewed the entire contents of her button tin onto an old man's waistcoat. It's her favorite garment in the world. How wonderful. That is wonderful. And again, my eyes are so terrible. Annalisa has said she's making a quilt, because you've talked a lot about making quilts in the book too, which I haven't referred to. So she's making her quilt from her dad's old tie collection as a special way to remember him since he passed away.
So we used to do these, another thing we loved, because I've always made, when we had the brand from somewhere, we used to have these collections that were actually called memory clothes. And one of them was that we took, that was too complicated to describe in the book, we took men's shirts and basically kept adding stripes to them, and we used them as clothes. You know, when you do clothes covers, how do you call them? Garment bags.
Okay. Yeah.
So they would just be shirts, and they would open. They were amazing, because on the hook there would be the man's shirt, which would button up all the way down, and then the down it would go the garment bag. They were beautiful. With men's shirts, we would use consume them by the gallon, make these beautiful garment bags.
I mean, that's the other thing, is adapting what you have into other things is fantastic. Tamsin has actually done some research here about this organization you mentioned, which I now can't find. But anyway, it's in Totnes. Was it Mend Assembly? It's in Totnes, which is Assembly. Yes, exactly. It's in Devon, which is in Devon, where they do
Devon. Yeah, well, there you go. It's my
Southwest.
Anyway, check them out because they're really interesting, and they also have.
It's only down the road.
Not a glossary, but they direct people to local menders all over.
Oh, that's really good to know. Perhaps we should do some kind of tie up with them for Somerset. I mean, the Southwest, there's lots of things going on, and I love it. Jeans, so somebody, and I'm afraid it just...
Who said I have two of you from somewhere? Hang on a second.
Oh, this is Jack Cloak says she's got two of your from somewhere sweaters. She came to a sale of yours in Ravenscourt Park.
Oh my God, you can't, don't tell me you still wear them. I'm so moved.
Well, Jack is...
So they were loved and they lasted, obviously.
Obviously. Well, Jack lives around the corner from here. I may well have seen her wearing them, in fact. But, yeah, well, you'll have to come and visit us here. I mean, there's a real community. If you feel like a couple of days off, not yet, but when there's some time.
I can't wait to leave the house.
Yeah, well, we've got lovely beds and a cafe, and you are so welcome here, and we would just love to have you here. And I think you'd like it too. It's not quite day, but it's pretty wonderful, actually. I'm very into the Southwest myself. So that was Jack. And Joe, who I know, I'm pretty sure is our friend Joe Fairley, is saying, it's a wonderful book, Ursula. Not pious at all, as some books can be on this subject. This is coming from Jo, who herself is a writer and author of many books about sustainability, can be on this, but she finds it inspiring and engaging. Hooray. So well done. That's a compliment from somebody who knows what she's talking about. And I'm just seeing if these things move so fast. I'm just going to see. Oh, Pamela Esterson is online. Hi, Pam. So she's in America somewhere. So that's brilliant. Oh, that makes me feel quite. I mean, that technology is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, here we are. I'm in Somerset. You're in London, South London. Pam's somewhere like Chicago because she's always moving around. And here we all are. And Louise Allen is up north of England. I don't know where everybody is. but it's just, it's so ironic that we have become more together as we have become more stuck in one place, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's also the realization that we can't see each other that kind of puts some sort of a pressure of keeping more in touch.
Yeah, and I think,
Sam, I can't believe you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And not that I think we should stay on Zoom all the time. We need to get off screens, as should our children and our grandchildren in my case. But on the other hand, if we didn't have it, it would just, it would be awful. And we can connect and we can communicate. We have lovely afternoons when we do craft, actually, and people come in and they have a cup of tea, and it's almost like being in the same room, almost. And, you know, we're very open and it feels very safe space. And it's just extraordinary how life has changed, and it's going to change even more. So we're nearly coming to an end. We've got a few more minutes. So I'd just like to go back. Oh, thank you. Some lovely things being said. I'd just like to go back to how we see the future of the fashion industry, the future of, within that, retail, the future of Fashion Week. What does that all look like? It's a big question to you, Ashley, but what does it look like?
I'm tranquil with my answer because, you know, I continue to believe that it'll be small. That, you know, geologically speaking, at one point there was a meteorite that kind of got rid of all of the dinosaurs, and that's when mammals started to flourish. And I kind of think that this is going to happen because the big brands, amazing as, you know, whatever, they are still showing that they can't change rapidly enough, while the little guys are pumping with energy, creativity. They're putting their creativity as a service, you know, not for the profit, but for people, for the environment. And this is the future. At Fashion Revolution, we do have our main sort of, it's called the theory of change. And for us, we believe in a fashion industry that conserves and restores the environment and that values people over profit and growth. That's what we stand for. I really, really think that this is the future. And it will be a much more inclusive industry. It won't be such a Western-focused industry. But the truth is that, and I wrote this for a piece for CNN, that we did something with them in September. And I don't quite remember it exactly now, but it's something around the fact that there is one innovation that doesn't require technology that we haven't tried, and that's treating each other as equals. Because unless we treat each other as equals, we're not equally invested in our world, in our environment. And that's what we need to get to do. We need to get to work for our environment, and we can only do it by doing it together. So fashion is just going to have to somehow let go of its high horse and embrace this kind of radical transparency and diversity that I feel it owes to its customers anyway.
That's absolutely beautiful. I agree entirely. And I think I was going to say it's a bit of a negative, so I don't want to end on it, but I do want to bring it up, nothing to do with us, that Fashion Week got a slating today in the Daily Mail because they're using sponsors. And my friend Stella Creasy got 60 MPs to write to them to say we shouldn't be doing it. They're using a company called ClearPay to sponsor them, who are loan sharks, who are encouraging young women to borrow money they can't afford to buy clothes they don't need. And I have to say, I mean, I'm glad that Stella has called them on it, but this is the sort of change we need to see. This doesn't happen. People don't buy beyond their means. They are creative within their means, and we all work together to create a sustainable world. And if we have too much in our wardrobes, and I've certainly got things up there, then we give them to people who don't have enough and let them adapt them and convert what they've got into something that they feel happy wearing. I think it's going to be a huge change. I really do think it will stop being this obsolescence, this cyclical, seasonal
ready
thing.
To waste instead of ready to wear. That's what we're doing.
Oh, I wrote that down. I love that quote, your quote there.
Instead of prêt-à-porter. So we really have no excuse. We're actually doing it, and we've got the words. So we got to stop.
And it's going to be a fantastic world, and we're going to do it all together. Just our friend Pamela Esserson is actually in ice-covered Washington DC, missing us both. Love to you, Pam. So love to all of you here, and a huge thank you to you, Ursula. I mean, I know that you're really busy and you've got so much going on with all this global campaigning, and it's like you're doing everything you were born to be. And I think for me too, I feel that's the same way, really. That there's a lot of us, and I'm delighted and blessed that I have so many in my life, amazing women who it's like we've been kind of in rehearsal and in training for what the rest of our life's going to be. And now, if there was ever a time for women to come together, to work together, to tell our stories, to share, to support each other, that is right now. And that's going to be women not only in our own small communities and our own countries, but across the world. And you've proved that you can start a movement in a very simple way, and it can become huge and responsible for enormous change. So thank you
Lynne, you've
much.
changed so many lives too, including, I mean, you know, you're such an inspiration for me as well as a friend.
Thank you.
And so it is even more of an honor to hear these words coming from you, who I know you mean them because I know you know them.
Well, thank you, bless you, and I feel quite emotional, and it's wonderful work that you're doing, really wonderful. So bless you, thank you everybody that's come on to the call. I know there's lots of people here, and there's lots of people probably that'll watch it later, and the word is out. Time for change, and better than ever. Thank you so much, and bless you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.